Right, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's Planning Committee. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absent. Are there any apologies to be noted?
Councillor Cheetham.
Councillor Cheetham, who's been
Who's been substituted for
substituted with the Councillor Durrant. Yeah. The second item on the agenda is declaration of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests and or other interests not already on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Cooper.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest on item 6 as ward member. I will be speaking, but obviously not taking part in the debate or decision following that.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Item 3, declarations of predetermination. Any member who cannot determine an application solely on the information presented to the committee at the meeting today is asked to declare that they are predetermined on that item and on the agenda and to withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any predetermination to declare? No, thank you, members. Item 4 on the agenda. We now have the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday the 14th of January 2025. Are we happy that they are a correct record and can we agree them by acclamation? All in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Right, those are approved. Right, we now move on to our first application. Item 5 on the agenda, NED stroke 22 stroke 00387 stroke OL, North Wingfield. The first application is in respect of land northeast of allotments on William Thorpe Road, North Wingfield. If I can hand over to Adrian Kirkham, the officer in charge of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I just go through a few slides for members, I've got a few points that I'd like to raise an introduction, Chair. As you say, the application is submitted in outline with all matters reserved for further approval for a hotel, pub and nursery. The hotel is described as a wedding venue and an indicative layout has been submitted in support of the application, which I'll show you in a few minutes. The site comprises an area of land previously described as Plot 7 of a larger housing development that's currently being undertaken on land to the east of the site, and it was to be laid out as a football pitch with associated car parking and changing facilities. Again, I'll show you a slide of that in a few moments. The facilities were to be provided before 95% of the associated dwellings are occupied, and resulted, in part at least, in no Section 106 provision being provided for sports and open space provision in respect of that larger site. The delivery of the pitch was also accounted for in the Council's playing pitch strategy of 2017 and remains necessary to meet the needs across the district, and policy ID 10 of the local plan seeks to retain the facility in that context. The site also plays a part, Chair, in maintaining a gap between Homewood and North Wingfield as set out in the supportive text in the local plan, and the site is not previously developed. There is a submitted indicative plan, Chair, which shows 2 muggers, but these fall outside the application site, being located in blue land that's also owned and controlled by the applicant. Late in the application process, another plan that showed the replacement of the 2 muggers with 1 junior football pitch and altering the red line site was informally submitted, and the applicant was advised that this would not be considered as part of the overall application unless and until certain procedural matters had been addressed, and therefore, Chair, those plans don't fall before you this afternoon for consideration. It's also important, Chair, to note that a condition requiring the provision of the originally submitted scheme is live, and if not provided, the failure to provide the pitch would breach the relevant planning condition. A Section 73 application seeking to remove or amend that condition should be made to address them in any case, and this application standing alone can't vary those conditions. Notwithstanding all that, Chair, Sport England maintain an objection to the informally submitted revised scheme on the basis of the information currently available, and that's in addition to the objection they've raised to the application that's before you. The failure to deliver the originally envisaged playing pitch and associated facilities is, however, a consideration for you today. In respect of the other matters raised in the officer report, Chair, officers note that the land is allocated for housing development in the local plan, and therefore the proposal fails to accord with that objective for the site. The failure to provide the originally proposed football pitch will result in a deficiency in open space associated with the wider housing site, and additionally the failure to provide the pitch would be contrary to the Council's own playing pitch strategy, contrary to the advice of Sport England, and not assessed in consultation with the relevant governing body, i.e. the Football Association. The alternatives, Chair, aren't quantified or substantiated in terms of their management or maintenance either. Even if an alternative scenario is considered to be acceptable in principle by you, the outstanding condition on the outline permission needs to be addressed, as does the delivery, management and maintenance of any future facility, and the potential for any relevant Section 106 contributions to support an alternative delivery either on the site and or to upgrade other facilities. And those matters all remain outstanding. Officers, Chair, consider that in any case the development in its current form fails to address the sports and recreation needs of the areas of the district that are specified. Additionally, Chair, the site was envisaged to retain a gap between the ribbon of development along William Thorpe Road and Greater Homewood. The development of the site would result in this gap being lost and so be contrary to policy LC1 of the local plan and its associated policies SD3 and SDC12. And that is in accord with advice received from landscape specialists who advised that the development would be harmful and views across the site should be retained. All matters are reserved for further approval. However, the indicative layout indicates that the plot would be heavily developed across its entire width and the gap would be lost. And the indicative design advice is that the proposed scheme would not in any case be an appropriate design for the site. There's little to justify the potential benefits of the scheme or quantify them, Chair, although it is acknowledged that some economic and social benefits may accrue from the scheme. However, officers consider the Council's tourism policies don't support the proposal due to its impact on the character of the area from this new build development. Just in closing, Chair, at yesterday's site visit I was asked about how many car parking spaces are proposed. Bearing in mind the submitted scheme is only indicative, 100 car parking spaces are shown on that plan, and that does include for some disabled parking provision. It's unclear, however, how and if they would serve the indicative football pitches too, and this is unchanged on the informally submitted scheme, which also has 100 spaces shown. There is, Chair, though, no objection to the current scheme, which doesn't include for the sports provision from the Highway Authority. Overall, and in closing, Chair, officers consider the scheme contrary to the development plan when read as a whole, and the benefits of the scheme don't outweigh the harm caused, and so officers recommend that the application is refused for the two reasons set out in the report, Chair. Just briefly, I'll take you through some slides if I may. The application site, Chair, hopefully will emerge out of the mist in a second. You don't want to see pictures of me. The application site, Chair, is shown at the centre of the slide, outlined there with the site coloured in a beige form. To the northeast you can see the wider housing development that the site relates to, and to the southwest are allotments, and then the William Thorpe Road running from the bottom left of the slide to the middle right. And you can just see the area between the site and the road is the area where two indicative mugger pitches are shown on the indicative submitted layout. And just in closer order, there's the site again. You can see again the housing site, the allotments, and the area to the road frontage. Just for some context, Chair, this is the phasing plan that was associated with the outline permission that was granted, and it shows the housing development which is being built out, and then areas of landscaping and drainage running through it. And you can see at the bottom of the slide that's the playing pitch, the pavilion and the associated parking facilities which are shown on the plan associated with that permission, and which is required to be delivered by condition 26 of that permission. Just for context, Chair, I've included here the site plan as proposed, with the red line showing that's the application site, and the blue land which is other land in the applicant's control, and the associated indicative layout with, as I say, all matters of the application to be reserved. But this is the indicative plan that's been submitted, showing the pub and hotel to the north of the site, i.e. the left. Then in the centre there's the nursery building and the car parking that's proposed, and then within the blue land to the right, that's the south, the two mugger pitches which are shown on that indicative plan. And just to set the scene in respect of what there was some discussion with the applicant about during consideration of the application, although never formally submitted, this is the revised red line that was shown, and the indicative plan showing one junior football pitch with a netting to the roadsides to replace the two mugger pitches. But I just need to stress, Chair, this was never formally submitted, as there are a number of procedural matters that would need to be addressed in respect of this, including potential application fees and other matters, and no consultation has been undertaken on this revision. Just to set the site in some context, Chair, this is the site prior to the development commencing. You can see it is formerly farmed, and that's views across it towards the countryside to the northwest, with Homewood in the distance on the right. And this is just to show what the site looked like as of June 2023. You can see it's been altered in form and content. I believe the site may well have been stripped of its topsoils, and then piles of mound from the other development sites placed on it. And then finally, Chair, just some more up-to-date photographs. They're just three that we saw yesterday at the site visits, showing the site from its eastern side through to the centre and then to the west. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Can you just turn your microphone off, Adrian? Right, members, we have two speakers on this application, the first of which is the applicant, Darren Atkinson. I'm sure you're aware of the procedures. Just press the little button when you want to start, the right-hand button.
Am I on now?
You're on now,
Oh,
yeah,
good.
and you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, councillors. I'm Darren Atkinson of Atkinson Construction Group, who is the applicant. We're a local building company based in Grassmore, if you didn't know. In 2016, an outline planning permission was granted for a public house, shops, and as part of the housing development on this site. Those shops have now been completed, with the new Tesco's local being the key tenant, Barbers and Jackson's, the Bakers and Fish Restaurant all due to open shortly. Prior to this application, we met with both Homewood and North Wingfield Parish Councils. Both have strongly supported this application for the benefits it brings to their communities. Councillor Stone has called in this application today and has shown his support, stating it being a significant benefit to the communities it will serve. In recent years, all of the public houses in this area have closed. You may recall the William Thorpe Hotel, Jolly Farmer, Lord's Arms, Tom's Club, the Pig Hotel, and most recently the Homewood Miners' Welfare. The census confirms 4,500 people live in Homewood, with 9,500 in North Wingfield, with no hospitality left in Homewood. The scheme seeks to provide a nursery, hotel and public house in a much needed location. The officer's report suggests the main reason for refusal is based on the site is not providing a sports field. Councillors, you should note that the community already has several other sports fields close by. In particular, the closest football field is on Macefield Avenue, 250 metres away. 2 other football fields, a cricket pitch, 5-a-side court at Heath Road are 650 metres away. Not a big distance. Dark Lane, 1,000 metres away, 2 football fields and a cricket pitch. There are 2 further recreation grounds at Grassmore and Temple Normanton. Councillors are therefore asked to consider the benefits of providing this much needed facility for the community employment benefits it's going to provide, along with a meeting hub and accommodation to serve tourism to the Peak and businesses to Homewood and Clay Cross. Does another football field provide the same benefits to the local people as this application seeks? I therefore ask that you support the application for the benefits to this community and that it will serve. I thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you. Any members have any questions? Councillor Rouse.
Good afternoon. Could you tell me how many jobs do you expect this proposal will create?
At this moment, obviously, until we get a full application in the process, the anticipated employment that this will provide is going to be between 6 and 8 staff to the nursery. The public house will probably provide 6 full-time and 4 part-time jobs, and the hotel 14 full-time staff and between 6 and 10 part-time staff. Construction jobs on the developments are going to generate between 55 and 70 people during the build, and as a local developer, most of those operatives are actually employed locally, contributing to the local services in North East Derbyshire, Chesterfield and Bolsover. I would add that in final point that the reason for the closure of the old facilities in this area are that the pubs were not designed to cater for today's standards and requirements. That being families and food, which require larger seating areas and parking to be economical. The old facilities that have all been closed have been closed purely because they were selling beer and were not viable. This facility is a welcome thing for the local community. Thank you.
No further questions? Oh, sorry. Councillor Peterson.
Yeah. Hello. I notice on the plans that there's no provision at all for playing area for the nursery, for outdoor playing.
Well, the nursery, again, it's an outline permission there, I appreciate.
Yeah.
A full application would take into consideration any external requirements that would require, but this is purely an outline application to get an approval of the facility in its first instance. Full designs would be obviously in consultation with planning officers.
Right, thanks. Can I have another question? Where was the original hotel supposed to be built then, on the original plan?
The original hotel, based on the 2016 application, was never defined as a particular location. It was an indicative location within the planning application. Again, as the scheme developed with our consultation representatives, the design took place, and obviously the way that it developed, obviously it didn't incorporate the pub within the sort of central core of that development. As I said, we had consultation with local parish councils, and they, going back to a point that Mr. Kirkham raised about the openness of that space that he preferred to obviously consider was going to be kept a green space, the North Wingfield Parish Council suggested that space was not a benefit to them to keep open other than the frontage, which they preferred, hence why the hotel was pushed to the back of that site. And as I've said, there is, if not 5, there's 7 recreational grounds that are managed by North East Derbyshire's funds. This is going to be another recreational ground that needs managing, which in reality is not needed, whereas there is no pubs in the area. There's no facilities for... We've just built 500 houses on that site and 300 across the road with another site. The community has got no facility. And that is the point that I'm making. I mean, you know, I live not far away. I'm not, you know, inadverse to the locality of this site. I'm not a national builder. I'm a local builder. So I know this area very well. And it's quite sad if this committee today decide to turn it down based on a loss of a football field against the job creation and the benefits that this facility is going to provide if you accept it.
If you go ahead with this, what about the S106 money? The playing field, as far as I recall, the football field was in lieu of S106?
I couldn't answer that question because I don't believe there was a 106 relating to the playing field. But again, you know, the benefits of this scheme provide more benefits than the Section 106 would have ever have provided. You know, a playing field is only creating an area for a certain small population of the community that would use it, when there's 5 other recreational uses or sites that they could use. Whereas this is the only public house, hotel, day centre that they would have.
Right. Thank you. Look, let me take this off.
Councillor Dillon?
Thank you, Speaker. Hello there, Mr Atkinson. So I do have a few questions. Just to a point just from a colleague, I mean, the S106 funding for a site of this size, you'd be expecting to run into the tens of thousands, so it's not a small amount you're talking about. But first of all, I had a few questions. I noticed that the Muggers don't have any changing facilities. Is that correct? And if so, why not?
To repeat myself a little, it's an outline application. The detail of whether the Mugger has a changing facility or the daycare centre has an external play area are really for a full application. This is really to determine a principle that this committee hopefully decides today to say, are you in favour of an hotel facility, a daycare centre on this site? And then you would be given the opportunity in future to accept a full application that provides those answers.
I have a few questions, if that's okay, Chair. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I understand that it's an indicative application, so we'll proceed with my questions on that assumption. So bear that in mind. I understand it as well. It's fine. So approximately how many rooms at the hotel would you expect? I know you're not going to be able to give an exact number, but ballpark, please.
I would have thought probably around 30 to 40 as a max. It's not going to be a massive hotel, but obviously the point about the hotel is that, and I know this because I'm a local business and I deal with a lot of local businesses in Claycross and in Oakwood on the industrial estates, which are all part of North East Derbyshire. There is no facility local to those facilities or those businesses where people can come from away to do business, stop overnight without going into Chesterfield or slightly out of Peast, when Oakwood could have the facility for those businesses to use either as a hub, as a meeting place, and to facilitate accommodation for people that are coming in on business, let alone the tourism side of it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I just had a few more questions there. So in 2017, you did the initial application for the football fields. Why did you do a football field then, and you're doing a hotel and pub and everything now? So I didn't quite understand why that had changed. On the back of that, you've said that there's a football field 250 metres away, there's a tennis and some other facilities 600 metres away, another football field 1,000 metres away. I also know very well the facilities and the Muggers in Grassmoor because that's where I live. I know that the stuff in Grassmoor existed in 2017 because I was there. Did these exist in 2017, and why did?
What, the others?
The others, yes.
No, they're historical to Oakwood. Macefield Avenue has been there since the houses in Macefield Avenue were built, the council houses.
Yeah.
The other recreational areas at the back of Heath Road, which again is an historical sort of sports complex that would have been part of the mining community of Oakwood. So they're all historical. There are no new ones there. But you know, the point is, if you were to go to look at these facilities, yes, they are used, no doubt, on a weekend by a number of sort of clubs. But as a general rule, they're not highly used. They're not overused. And to put another one within 250 metres of another football field seems a little bit unnecessary.
Well, that's my confusion there. these existed historically, and they are well. I can tell you for a fact, Grassmoor is very well used, because we've got the sports teams and we've got the muggers regularly used by the kids locally, and we've got the pitches around. Why was this not put in the application in 2017 then? That's the bit I can't understand. You've got the facilities there, they've been there for the entire length, but you're asking for a hotel now, and in the past you've approached Sports England for a pitch. I don't understand why this hasn't turned up in 2017.
We've not approached Sports England. Sports England were approached by the officers in a...
Yes, sure. As part of this application, I mean,
Yes, yeah.
they have been approached.
Yeah, but not on our behalf. It was an application, and again, my consultant will be able to probably answer the point more clearly than I will about the Sports England involvement. It's a little bit more technical than I can answer on that. As I said, the original application in 2016 was supported by the committee of its day for the benefit of a public house in that area, which, if you're a local man, which you are clearly, Grassmoor, there is no facility in Homewood. They've all shut, which is quite sad because, you know, you've got a lot of people that would like to probably use a facility locally, rather than to get in a car and drive out several miles. So there's a lot of benefits to creating this public house, an hotel facility for the benefit of lots of reasons, and a daycare nursery, which again, there is no daycare nursery in Homewood. The nearest one is in North Wingfield, but if you've got children in Homewood, you've got to take them to North Wingfield, which seems a little bit ridiculous.
Just to stop you a little there, my question was, why have you applied previously for a sports field where clearly you've thought about this heavily, but now we're applying for a hotel? And that's a good argument, but I don't understand why there's been an application previously for a sports field and now it's a hotel. But that, you know, mistakes, fullness of time. Just a couple of questions to, have we received, because on our paperwork you've said that it's partly for officers, yes?
Yeah, can we
Homewood Parish Council,
bring that up because we get questions for officers shortly?
that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have you, last question then, Chair,
Thank you.
will this land be expected to go up in value compared to what you're putting here now compared to what's going on the pitch, what was going there previously?
Undoubtedly, I would say yes. I'm not, you know, there's no surprise that an hotel site will be more valuable than a football field. That is not necessarily why I'm here, and you know, whether you think that is the case or not. As I said, I'm a local builder. I've lived in this area all my life, and I feel that, you know, in developing the whole of that site and not putting something back more beneficial to a community is going to be a travesty if this committee doesn't accept the benefits that it provides, regardless of an increased value or not. Accepting, I am a businessman, but it's not about that in this instance. It truly is provide the community a benefit.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Atkinson. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I've got one question, Mr. Atkinson, just regarding the indicative plan that was originally drawn up. Had the public house within the centre of the development. Can you tell me what happened to that area of land that was in the original?
Not with great knowledge in that sense. I mean, obviously, I employ consultants who come up with housing designs and obviously the road design and everything else. The problem, obviously, of that site, which some of you may be aware of, it was an ex-open cast site. There was constraints within the ground that obviously dictated the design of the road and how the houses could actually sort of be developed in that location, because you've got what's called a high wall where the open cast had taken out a lot of ground and you couldn't build houses on that location. So whilst in the principle of the outline planning permission that was probably submitted, it was you know, an idea to put the sort of public house in the centre and create around it. But when the actual engineering designs technically looked at it, it wasn't a feasible, sensible route, because the road had to follow a certain line to make it sort of viable and economical to put the road in the right location. So that's why the location of the public house didn't happen in the way that it was first envisaged on an outline application.
So is there something else on that site then now?
Well, there's the creation of the retail area where we've got the public house, not the public house, sorry, the Tesco's, the bakers, a fish restaurant, and obviously a barber's, which again provides benefits to that local community, which they didn't have in that location on walking distance to the properties. I don't know what to say beyond that.
Okay, thank you. Don't think we've got any further questions. If you want to retake your seat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, next speaker on this item is Callum Redford, the agent. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready, Callum. Thank you.
The perceived loss of a future football pitch is based on the outdated 2017 playing pitch strategy, which does not reflect the current demand. Both North Wingfield and Homewood Parish Councils have expressed support for this leisure development over a playing field. On the issue of the settlement gap, I must stress this is not untouched countryside. It's an undeveloped plot within an existing local plan allocation. The officer report itself acknowledges that William Thorpe Road already has ribbon development. This argument has also been tested at appeal, most recently in 2020, with the inspector quoting, "It was difficult to appreciate a change in identity between the settlements in this location. The overall impression when travelling in either direction along William Thorpe Road is one of a continuous built-up area. In my view, there is already a fair degree of merging between settlements." The original William Thorpe Fields approval did include a public house and restaurant, as Mr Atkinson alluded to, and that shows a recognised need for such facilities. The original permitted development did have to evolve to meet the post-COVID market needs. Homewood has almost no hospitality venues since the miners' welfare closed last year, and it's also important to note that Sport England was consulted on a non-statutory capacity, as the site is not currently or historically been a playing field within the past 5 years. Members should also note that our legal expert has advised that Sport England's objection is not a legal barrier to approving this application, should you be minded to grant permission. Members should also consider policy WC5, which supports tourism and visitor development where it reflects local character and location. This proposal aligns with that policy, offering a well-integrated hospitality venue that attracts visitors while maintaining a suitable relationship with the surrounding area. This development will bring investment and social benefits for the district's long-term growth, enhancing its visitor economy, especially when you consider North East Derbyshire's location on the Peak Fringe. The aim of this outline application is to debate the principle of this new leisure development. Concerns about design, layout, drainage, pedestrian access will all be addressed at reserved matters and working with officers. And the planning tools exist to resolve any design weaknesses to ensure that a brilliant opportunity for this new investment is not lost. Chair, this proposal will bring jobs, investment and valuable community assets beyond those provided by a prospective football pitch. It meets local needs and aligns with the broader economic objectives of the district. I urge the committee to approve this application. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members have any questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, Mr Redford. Thank you for bringing us back to the planning report on what I should be considering as a planning committee member. So I'm looking at, which you've touched on already, 820 and 821, planning balance and conclusion of the report, and you've touched on some of that already. And I know our officers will probably go on to explain that and how we should be considering it as a committee. You do say about evidence for economic and social benefits, and our report says there is no evidence of actual need for this type of commercial development in this location, and neither are the benefits quantified. So that's what I've got to look at as a planning committee member, and that's what, not just taking the word, your word, or the word of the developer that spoke earlier, it's to look at the actual evidence. So my first question would be, have you not provided that evidence or any sort of study at all other than hearsay and what people that might live nearby have said So what I've got to look at is the actual evidence. Does it provide that benefit, and how much benefit it does? So that's the first question, please.
I mean, in the sense we have provided a sort of desktop study of what development needs are. I mean, it doesn't take a sort of in-depth viability assessment to see what is in the parish itself. I mean, the closest public house in Homewood is, you've either got the White Hart down the road at North Wingfield, or you've got the Elm Tree, which is, well, I don't think anyone could really walk to it. You know, there is nothing in Homewood in terms of public house provision. Again, looking at the hotel side of it, I mean, where's the nearest hotel? It's the, is it Twin Oaks, that's it. And again, you know, we've got the Twin Oaks, we've got the Bateman's Mill at the other side of Clay Cross, there's the Ibis in Chesterfield. There's nothing in this area which provides accommodation when you look at the employment areas round about us. You know, you've got Homewood Business Park, you've got William Thorpe Industrial Estate, Coney Green Road, the rest of Clay Cross itself. And we're brilliantly located off Junction 29. You've got the Peak Fringe, the Peak District. It's too good a location not to have something there. And as we said, it was part of the original application. Unfortunately, while time passed, you know, the development had to sort of adapt to the post-COVID market. You know, public houses and hotels weren't really sought after in 2020 when the reserve matters were coming in. That area of land which was for the public house, you know, it came round for a care home. Yeah.
Thanks for the answer you're giving me, but what I've asked is what evidence? So that desktop study you mentioned, has it been given to our officers to be put into a report?
Officers, yeah.
Because at the minute it says there's no evidence. So that's what I'm working on. It's not just my local knowledge of the area, it's that evidence. That's what I should be looking at and what other members should be looking at when we're considering this. I'll happily be corrected by our planning officers on that, but that's what I should be looking at.
If I can...
And up to now, I haven't heard anything. So I'll go on to my second question, if that's okay. You mentioned WC5, that you said it says it accords with that. We've got it in our report that it doesn't accord with that, and I'm sure that'll be addressed later by officers. But my question is, with regards to the rest of the policies, it's not just that you think it's a good idea, that some members might think it's a good idea, that in an opinion it might be needed. How does we've got the advice here on this report that it goes against SS1, LC1, WC5, SDC3 and 12. So all that's in front of me. So what I want to hear from you as the agent is that from you that it doesn't go against those policies, that it does, that your application here, your outline planning application, does accord with those policies, and why I should consider it does, because I'm going to be asking the same things of the officers. So I want to be told that. So I've got the policies in front of me and I can read them, but I'd like to hear from you as agent, to give you a chance here. It doesn't go against these policies and it accords with all of these, and that's why you should. So that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully that's fair, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that if you want. I can go through the planning statement which we prepared, which goes through those. Yeah. I mean, we've done the planning assessment within the planning statement. I can sort of highlight points in it, the principle of development. I mean, if the NPPF, we look at the NPPF as well. Yeah, I mean, policy WC5 is the main one. I mean, that's the one we obviously need to consider. But, I mean, so try not to take up too much of the committee's time. I would suggest you look at the planning statement, which gives you the sort of planning assessment of it. And obviously point out the relevant paragraphs of the NPPF which support the need for sort of economic objectives, social benefits, to development.
Thank you. You want a bit more in-depth answer, I'm presuming?
Well, if there is no answer, I'm happy to ask the same questions of the officer. Just wanted to,
As I say,
just wanted to give you a chance, that's all, to tell me why you thought it was important with our policy. And we're advised that it's not.
well, as I say, the planning assessment is within the planning statement why we've set out it accords with those policies. You know, I'll happily sort of reinforce the fact that, you know, policy WC5 will support visitor and tourism development. It's not in the open countryside, as I said, it's within the settlement boundaries. Sustainable development, it's, you know, it's, as I said, this is an outline application. Design will be confirmed at the reserve matter stage, but we'll be looking at sustainable construction and urban design parameters. You know, and again, when we'll consider the landscape arguments as well, you know, we have done the small desktop study on it. We have looked at the council settlement gap study, which also identifies that there's no physical gap or separation between North Wingfield and Homewood. So, you know, we've assessed from the landscape perspective, we do not believe that there's a significant landscape visual impact on this in accordance with that policy. And obviously, if we consider traffic as well, you know, we've assessed all of this technical detail. And it aligns with the original outline sort of aspirations for that public house and restaurant on the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durham.
Sorry, I just want to very quick, thanks for Councillor Foster for that. I just very quickly want to clarify with yourself. So for the SS1, the affecting the area, the line, the visual impact, your argument for saying that the officers are saying this will have a detrimental visual impact on the area, your argument is you disagree with it because you just disagree with that report. I don't see where your evidence is to say that just how you back that up, other than you say you disagree.
Has members not received the landscape technical note that we prepared on 31st of May 2024?
We have that. I believe we have that, don't we? But
which does address landscape concerns.
Right, we have that. The officers are saying they disagree, but the outcome of that is they disagree and you say you don't. Is there anything you wish to add to say that why you disagree? Because I didn't hear that, and I apologise if you did say, and I didn't catch it.
Well, I mean, the officers are obviously basing it on the settlement gap study, or what they perceive to be that there's a settlement gap there. I mean, the council's own settlement gap study says there is no gap, there is no separation between the two villages. You know, and as I say, it's been tested at appeal before, this principle of the merging between North Wingfield and Homewood, and an inspector has considered that and made the determination that both villages have merged together.
Okay, thank you. And just quickly, you've said repeatedly that both Homewood and both parishes have said that they support this. However, I don't see anything in writing that says that Homewood do support this. Do you have anything in writing that says they support this?
I believe they were on the portal, were they not? There is correspondence from Councillor Stone, I believe, on the portal.
He's not the parish council, though.
I thought they had made representation.
Thank you. Do members have any more questions? Councillor Rose.
Afternoon, Callum. You've mentioned Sport England and the objection. Can you explain what you meant about the legal advice, what had been received?
Yeah, I can expand on that.
Yeah.
I could probably do 3 minutes on that itself. So obviously, Sport England were consulted on a non-statutory basis. What that means is that Sport England were consulted, but they were not necessarily a requirement under development management procedures because the site doesn't meet the tests for Sport England to consult as a statutory body. the tests are that it's not local authority owned, and it is not currently or historically been a playing pitch within the last 5 years. As a stress again, it's an empty development plot. So on the back of that, we've commissioned a legal review based on Sport England's non-statutory response to assist the understanding of how the non-statutory response would affect the application progressing. They obviously argued that the development would remove sports facilities from the original approval, which were shown indicatively on that outline. The idea was that that area was going to be set there as an indicative playing pitch. The conclusions from our legal expert were effectively that the LPA is not legally required to refer itself to the Secretary of State if it was minded to approve, as the application does not meet the criteria for a mandatory referral to the Secretary of State under the TCPA development management procedures. Sport England's objection does not also mean an automatic refusal. What I have been told is, from our legal expert, is that the members should consider the new application based on planning judgment and consider the potential benefits for the new development against the loss of what possibly could be a future football pitch. The other thing to also note is that condition 26, the wording of it, there's some doubt there as to the 95% dwellings hereby approved. Our legal expert believes that the 95% of dwellings refers to the number permitted at outline, which is 550, not the number delivered by the reserved matters. For the reserved matters to have been the trigger, there should have been additional wording within condition 26 to make that more explicit.
Okay.
I hope that's answered.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the planning balance and what we'll be looking at, you touched briefly on the gap and about the gap being eroded. If councillors look on page 17 of the actual report, it speaks there on 8.8 about plot 7 is the only remaining parcel of land that separates Homewood and North Wingfield. Yeah, and that's recognised in, as it says, in the local plan text. It then goes on to say your report, the applicant's landscape report, argues that the two settlements have already merged by the ribbon development along William Thorpe Road. So I understand that. I've got those 2 points. After that, in 8.10, it says the council commissioned a report from a landscape consultant which has examined the landscape and visual effects from a number of viewpoints. The report concluded that the development would result in moderate adverse effects upon the landscape character and visual amenity, and that it is desirable that the long distance views be preserved and the gap retained. So on 8.8, we've got our officers commenting, and then in 8.9, we've got your report, and then 8.10, we've got this separate landscape consultant which has been commissioned. Have you got any further comments on that particular report? Not the first two, but the third one. Have you got any further comments on that? Because that's part of the planning balance, and I've got to think about how that gap's going to be eroded, and that's why I think we've got that separate report. So have you got any further comments, just to give you a chance again to put your case forward? So again, I'll give you plenty of lead up here to give you a chance to think about what to say. So any comments you've got on that separate report that's been requested afterwards?
Is this the landscape advice report? Well, was it landscape consultants, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why there's an argument there that is a settlement gap, but it's not a settlement gap. If you look at the local plan policy maps, the settlement boundaries for North Wingfield and Homewood are right next to each other. It is the same line. And you know, the simple thing of just walking along William Thorpe Road itself, there is no separation. If you're driving along from North Wingfield to Homewood, where does didn't put, oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Where was I? Yeah, so we've looked at the sort of experiential travelling along William Thorpe Road, and that, is there a merge between settlements? Yes. Is there a gap? Very briefly. And in the design of that, again, I stress it's an outline application. We have prepared that indicative site plan to show that we have moved the hotel above or sort of north of that, separate that from Wingthorpe Road, to maintain that sort of settlement gap through the incorporation of a sports facility, whether that be a mugger or a junior pitch. But by moving the hotel up towards the development of William Thorpe Fields, there is still going to be maintained a small gap. It will be a small gap, but it wouldn't be any more than what you would experience from going along William Thorpe Road. The other point also is to note that we've looked at the localised ridge along the western boundary of the site. It's most prominent visually from Chesterfield Road as you're going between Grassmoor and North Wingfield. If you look up towards that ridge, you can see a few roofs of the houses, and then you'll see the 3-storey apartment block from the Avant site.
Could you clarify which road you're speaking of when you're talking about the ridge?
Sorry, okay.
You've lost which ridge you're on about.
It would be helpful if we could have had a visual. It would have been helpful. Can we get a site? There's a site plan. Have you got a site plan there?
We'll pull that up because we know the area, but like when we start talking.
Yeah, but yes. If it helps, the landscape review, figure 3.
Thank you very much.
Figure 3 on the landscape review was taken standing on Chesterfield Road looking towards the site. It's not the best bit, it's a little bit blurry on this one, but it's the best I've got just now. You can see where I've said the existing apartment block, and you can just about see maybe the top floor and the roof in that picture. That's rough. If you look a couple of metres to the right of that apartment block, that's roughly where the hotel building would be. And our landscape review would suggest that if it's roughly about the same height as that apartment block, which is 3 storeys, it's not going to have any significant impact on the landscape visual.
Yeah, that's fine. I was after really comments on that report, but thank you, answer.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, if you want to retake your seat. Thank you. Right, members, now time to put your questions to officers about the application. Who's going to start us off? Councillor Durham.
Quick one, first of all. The applicant and the agent have both referred to Holmwood Parish Council being supportive of it, but that's not in the pack. Can we confirm whether we've received that or not, please?
There's nothing that I'm aware of that's coming from Holmwood Parish Council. North Wingfield Parish Council, their comments are set out in the report and they have supported the application.
Yeah, question to Adrian. I think it's something that Councillor Durrant said earlier on. These muggers are nothing to do with this application, are they?
That's right. As I mentioned earlier on, the red line site just contains the area where the hotel, pub, nursery and the car parking areas. The 2 muggers that were part of the originally submitted application line, the blue land, that's not before you today. If they were to be developed, they would need permission in their own right to come forward.
And I know you explained before about the 106 and the football field. Would you mind doing it again? Thank you.
The background to the site is long and lengthy, and the original application was permitted in 2014 with a subsequent application made under Section 73 to readdress that because of viability issues. You heard Mr Atkinson talk earlier about the high wall. So the application in 2017 came in on the back of a request from the developer to reduce the 106 contributions over the whole site, and that was granted. However, there was never any suggestion of 106 monies in relation to recreation or sports provision, because this site was specifically shown on the drawings, the phasing plan that we saw earlier on. that was to provide a sports pitch and a pavilion and a car park to provide that sports provision across the entire site. So there is no 106 monies associated with the housing development that's going on that relates to sports and play provision.
Councillor Durrant?
Yeah, sorry to come back in. I just needed to gather my thoughts for a moment. I need more information on the settlement gap, because that seems to be a bit of a point of contention for the applicant and their agent. We're looking for it right now, but because it's quite a specific area, one, need to know where it is. Two, could you go into more detail about that settlement gap? Three, the applicant and the agent referred to case law that they've been to court. Are we aware of any of that, where this settlement gap has been challenged for our district? And four, there is no four.
I'll try and remember the first three, but correct me if I don't hit them all.
We can come back to the fourth one.
If you refer to page 10 of your papers, there's the extract from the local plan set out there, and you can see the application site has got the arrow pointing at it.
Yes, I saw that. It was more.
Yeah. The two settlements, as Callum's identified, the two settlements have no break in terms of their settlement limits, in that red line that goes off to the left of that drawing is North Wingfield, and the one to the right is Homewood, although the two parish boundaries are blurred. The issue about the gap comes from your policy LC1, which sets this site in its context in terms of housing delivery. And as we referred to in the report, the text that supports that policy on page 65 of your local plan sets out that the design and layout of that site should also protect the perceived sense of separation between the two historically separate settlements of Homewood and North Wingfield, and not give rise to further coalescence. And the aim of the originally approved scheme was to have this area as an open area that did retain some semblance of gap between the two settlements on the north side of William Thorpe Road. In relation to the point that was made about the appeal, which I think Councillor Durrant is referring to, relates to another site that's to the south of William Thorpe Road and the west of Tibshelf Road, that heads towards, as the name suggests, Tibshelf. So that was an issue that was discussed at that appeal, where the issue of North Wingfield and Homewood merging was discussed, and the inspector in that appeal did make reference to this gap, and I've got the paragraph that I think is being referred to here, which hopefully sets it in some context. The appeal inspector in that instance said that the consented development at Chesterfield Road, which I believe is this, the wider application site here, would infill an area of open land to the north of William Thorpe Road. I note that it will incorporate an area of open space along William Thorpe Road in order to help preserve a gap between the settlements, which will comprise playing fields, playing area, which is the application site before you this afternoon. Cumulatively, both this scheme and the appeal scheme, which are the two, the appeal scheme and the wider housing scheme, would mean that Homewood is growing to the west. The mitigation for the Chesterfield Road site, i.e. the application site before you, is not dissimilar to the landscape mitigation which could be undertaken at the appeal site, which would be to leave one field undeveloped. So I think that's the discussion that was debated, and it would be my interpretation of the paragraph that I believe is being referred to, that the retention of this space as an open area would retain some semblance of a gap between the two settlements. Clearly, if you granted permission for development of that gap, that would be significantly eroded and set aside, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Mr. Kirkham. For me on this, I really I don't know where to start on this, because it goes against so many policies in the local plan, I think we ought to be discussing each of those policies and each one that it goes against and looking at that that balance when we're putting weight on one and another. But it goes against SS1, ID1, ID10, LC1, WC5 and STC3 in your opinion, in officer's opinion. And it doesn't feel here like, you know, we're discussing that which is the main issue, and that so I'm a bit lost for words on this one with which policy to discuss first, and that's before we go into discussing the previous condition that's been broken from I did write it down, but from the previous housing application, that condition is going to be broken there, and we haven't really spoken about that. So that was put on from a previous application, and we gave weight to that in a previous application and agreed for that housing development to go ahead. And that, you know, because that condition was put on, and we're just going to, if we're not careful, if we give permission to this now, we're just going to go against that without even discussing it. So it's a real concern that it doesn't feel like it's at the table and in the discussion here. And I know we've got debate later on, and I do understand, Chair, that this is questions to officers, but I'm just a bit concerned that, you know, I feel like officers need to be leading us down here, us as councillors, down in the right direction when it comes to what we should be looking at and what we should be considering. It's in the report, but we've been asking different questions, and the conversation has been going in a different direction. So that's my concern here. And that's without looking at the Sport England comment that's on. I'm surprised that, you know, with them being such a powerful body, normally these seem to bypass us if there's a Sport England comment and they go straight to the Secretary of State. So I know they've got that much power. So there's three issues there. One is all the policies. One is the condition, which I think we should be speaking about, that was previously put on, that this should have been, that should still be standing. And I know this, I'm leading towards a debate here and not officers to questions to officers. But the third one is the Sport England comment. They seem such like, all three of those seem such like strong, big arguments that we're not giving weight to here because of the time we have. There's so much against this already. So if you could take that as a question, Mr. Kirkham. Thank you, Chair.
If I don't cover any of the points that you'd like me to, then feel free to come back. I'll deal first with the Sport England question from my perspective, and again, you've heard what's been said about that earlier on. Irrespective of whether Sport England are a statutory or non-statutory consultee, they've made comments on the application of opposing it, and also opposing the indicative suggested alternative that's not formally part of the application. So stripping aside whether they're statutory or non-statutory, that's a Sport England comment which should weigh in your consideration quite significantly, I would have thought, since we're talking about the potential loss of a sports pitch. Just on the issue of whether it's a statutory or non-statutory consultation, and colleagues may have something to say on this if I get it wrong, but if it's a statutory consultation, then you're right, Councillor Foster, that if you are minded to approve the application contrary to their advice, it would be a referral to the Secretary of State and a potential public inquiry. If it's non-statutory, it doesn't follow that. And we would need to consider, if you were minded to grant permission for the scheme, we would need to make sure that we safeguard the council in respect of what we should do next. If it's not a statutory consultation, we can go down the one route. Statutory, we can go down the other route. But I'm trying to set that aside just for the moment, because Sport England have commented on the application and made their views known on it. They opposed the application for the reasons that are set out. Just in terms of the condition, first of all, again, you've heard what's been said about that this afternoon, and that may be a moot point which may have legal discussion about. However, it's clear from the permission that was granted for the housing scheme and the condition that was imposed, which was never challenged, that there was an indication that this site would be delivered as a sports pitch with associated pavilion and sports area. And if you are minded to go a different route, then that's ultimately a matter for you as the decision maker, but you would lose that and therefore lose the associated benefits to the hundreds of houses that are being built on that site, in which this site was at least in part meant to provide some element to. The other issue around that, again, is, as Councillor Peterson mentioned in discussions with one of the speakers, that if you are minded to go down a different route and grant permission for development on this site, you will lose not only that sports provision, but also any potential other mitigation that you might have sought originally, and which you would lose unless you sort that through another means, and that is another discussion. But you would lose all that as well. Finally, just in terms of the policy, we've set out in the officer report our interpretation of those policies. SS1 in terms of your spatial strategy, LC1 in terms of this particular site and what the explanatory text of the local plan says about it and this gap. We've commented on our interpretation of WC5, which is the tourism policy, where you do encourage tourism provision, but that shouldn't be at the expense of everything else. It's not tourism or bust, it's a wider appreciation of the site and how development would fit in with that. And we don't believe that the proposal, albeit in an indicative form, meets that landscape character in this instance, and the loss of the gap, etc., etc. So, as officers, we've set out in our advice to members how we interpret those. I failed to mention ID10 as well, which is related to the playing pitch strategy, which this site is specifically mentioned in the action plan and the strategy that you have, and which fed into your local plan of 2021. So that's all part of that, and your policy ID10 would seek to retain those facilities subject to various criteria otherwise. So we believe as officers that from a policy position, bearing all that in mind, reading your local plan as a whole, which you have to do, you can't just cherry pick a policy and put all your weight on that without considering everything else, but we consider when considering it as a whole that it does fall foul of your local plan policies, hence our conclusion and our recommendation to you. I don't know if that answered all your questions, but if there are any others, I'll try.
Thank you, members. Did that answer yours as well, Tony? But section 20.
It was
Yeah.
section 26, wasn't it? Condition 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's section 26 of the outline permission that relates to this site as part of that wider housing site. And as I say, you've heard what's been said about that this afternoon, and that may be a moot issue, but it certainly set out a clear direction of travel, that it was an expectation that this site would be delivered for sporting provision.
Thank you, Adrian.
Right, members, if no further questions for officers, I'm going to open the floor for debate. Anybody wanting? Councillor Foster.
Go on, I'll make a start. Yeah, for me, Councillor Say can probably think already which way I'm thinking on this. You've probably got a guess already. I think we've got to on this. We've got to follow officers' advice on this. I think there's far too many policies here to be able to speak against and put a case against SS1, ID1, ID10. I don't think any of us are able to propose that we go against officers' recommendations and give this permission without being able to give reasons against all these policies. For me, these policies are put down here for us to follow. If we're going to propose to go against them, we've got to have good reason, and we've got to be able to convince each other and the whole committee, to go against those recommendations. And up to now, I've heard a lot of discussion, but nobody yet has, spoken for this application by explaining again how we can go against the policies. So the policies are quite clear. They've been explained to me quite clearly, so I'm quite satisfied that we should be going with the officers' recommendations. Unless I hear from other councillors during this debate why we should be going against our policies. The only other thing I'd add to it, which I haven't spoken about already, is being careful about following support from parish councils and councillors that aren't on, even if the district councillors, that aren't on this planning committee, because they may well support, well, it'll create jobs. Well, it'd be nice to have a pub there because there isn't somewhere. Well, we could do with a hotel there. Well, we could do with this facility there. We've got to be careful how much weight we put on parish councils and other councillors that may just be looking at those and not be looking at policy and not be looking at it in depth. So I'd urge caution when it comes to giving weight to those opinions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Durrant.
Yeah, so I'm going to echo slightly a little bit of what Councillor Foster said during the questions to officers. I'm a little overwhelmed, if I'm honest, on how many areas this breaches that my line of questioning sort of went in a slight different direction, because it is overwhelming to see how many different areas this is going against, and I don't think we can do anything other than breach it. I would say further is that I agree also that while we're the ones, the planning committee is the one to take the longer term and scrutiny of it, whereas we don't have Holmwood in front of us, we don't have anyone speaking for them, and we haven't received any representation from them. So at that point, it's hearsay, and we have to ignore it. We haven't received anything under the basics that we've received from Councillor Stone and the other parish council. I do take a dim view personally that the 106 funding was not there because it was going to be for sports. By and large, by my understanding, it was not going to be for sports purposes, and now it's not going to be for sports purposes. I take a somewhat dim view of that, and I don't think if we went ahead with approving this, that would set a bad precedent of ignoring our policies, but also ignoring the requirements to our local area. So I'll be voting it. I'm minded to vote against this and go with the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. The official's report is well configured. It's very clear, it's very good, very well argued. I've heard all the questions and the answers, very interesting. But the particular relevance is the reference to the football pitch being a greenfield infrastructure, together with the settlement separation. And I acknowledge the perceived economic benefits to be accrued from the development, but in my opinion, we should refuse this outline application. I think there is a benefit to have further discussion with the developer and look to the junior pitch together with some S106 to improve the other area football pitches. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can you just turn your microphone off, please? Anybody else want to take part in this debate? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, having listened to Councillor Foster's eloquent points there, I have to say that I am in agreement in the main what is said. I've heard little from the applicant or the agent about the policies enough to convince me to go against our decision, and I will be supporting officers on this application.
Right, thank you, members. I must admit I'm of the same opinion on this, and I'm going to make a proposition from the chair here that we go with officer recommendation and don't accept this plan application, refuse this application. Have we got a second? Councillor Jones? Are we using the button?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Should be 10.
10.
There's no voters.
Is your name on the screen? Are you still logged in? Are you pressing the screen? The screen?
There you go.
There we go.
Right. Right, thank you, members. That's everybody. That's unanimous that we go with officer recommendation. Thank you. members, we'll get back to the meeting. Item 6 on the agenda, NED stroke 24 stroke 00933 stroke FLH Stretton. The next item is in respect of 7 Ormbeam Way at Stretton. This is a garden landscaping scheme with 2 outbuildings and land at 7 Ormbeam Way, Stretton. I'm now going to hand you over to the officers to give us a brief presentation on this. Over
Thank
to
you, Chair.
Curtis. Thanks.
So the gardening scheme essentially consists of paving stones, a raked gravel garden and some planting. And the first outbuilding of the 2 is a greenhouse which is partially located in the root protection area, which I'll be referring to as the RPA from here out. And the greenhouse is situated on the garden. The second outbuilding, which will be situated on the hard standing, is located next to the host dwelling, and this sits outside of the RPA. It should be noted that the reason for this committee calling is to test the decision against policy SDC2 in regard to the impact of the proposal on the RPA. Members should also be aware that this planning application has been submitted due to this property having its permitted development rights removed on a previous approval. 2 late representations have been received and have been reported in the late representations pack, and I draw members' attention to the officer comments on page 2 in relation to the corrections to the report and the recommendations by the officers to update condition 3, which is located on the next page afterwards. In front of you at the minute is a site plan illustrating the wider street scene. The A61 lies to the east of the application site, and the junction at High Stairs Lane can also be seen at the bottom of the application site. Access into the wider building site can be seen, and there are protected trees that run along the boundary between the housing development and Prospect House to the west. The application site is etched in black with an orange beige fill-in, and the application site is located within the countryside and is within a secondary area of multiple environmental sensitivity. Members should also note that this application forms part of a wider development consisting of 28 dwellings, which has not been illustrated on the current mapping excerpt. And this is the location plan. And this better illustrates the application site in the wider area of the housing estate. The site is the one etched in red, and to the east of the site lies the A61, as stated prior, and High Stairs Lane is to the south of the site, with the trees lying to the west of the site, and Prospect House can also be seen to the west. This slide demonstrates the proposal. With the gardening scheme, shed and greenhouse identified, the RPA zone is illustrated in purple, and where there is overlap by the proposed development, this is marked in red. Details 1 through 5 on the proposed plans illustrate how the proposal interacts with the garden, and it's clear that the proposal mostly consists of above ground work with minimal intrusion into the soil. As a result of this, officers are of the opinion that the proposal will not result in the unacceptable loss of or harm to the trees or the root protection area. This slide reiterates the previous slide, and on the left you'll see the RPA cover area as well as the RPA contact area on the right, and again both serve to illustrate the RPA zone clearly. This slide shows the proposed dimensions of the shed that will sit on the existing hard standing. The dimensions are 2.35 metres in height by 3 metres in length by 2 metres in width. Although there's a rear window, this will allow no additional overlooking into the neighbouring property, and the shed is not a habitable space either, and the proposal will not be prominent in the surrounding area. Next is the greenhouse. And as you can see from the slide, it contains the dimensions of the proposed greenhouse. And although this is situated on the garden, which is at a higher level than the hard standing in the shed, officers believe it will provide no additional overlooking or overshadowing and will be mostly mitigated from view by the existing boundary features. And on the next slide, I have a site photo and if you direct your attention towards roughly the black tarp that you can see on site, that's roughly where this shed is going to sit on the hard standing. And then to the left of that shed, of course, you have the stairs that lead up into the garden, and then the greenhouse is going to be situated near the existing outbuilding, and that'll be sat near the wooden railings. And then for the final slide, these are the protected trees which lie, as I say, to the west of the application site, which is the back of the garden. This is just beyond the rear patio. And outside of that, I would like to conclude my presentation, Chair.
Thank you for that, Curtis. We have 5 speakers on this application, the first of which is Councillor Andrew Cooper. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As some of the members of the Planning Committee are aware, this site has a long history of planning concerns, around 11 years in total. Currently, there is an RPA root protection area in force protecting trees that back onto Prospect House. This includes 7 Ormbeam Way and 6 other properties. On page 23 of the report at 3.1, relevant planning history, a condition was added to remove permitted development rights for plots abutting the trees covered by the TPO 266, stating planning permission would need to be obtained in order to build extensions, outbuildings, hard surfacing, etc. That is why we're here today. The reason why the condition was included was to offer protection to the trees covered by that TPO in accordance with policy SDC2 of the North East Derbyshire Local Plan. This is the reason why I've called this application into Planning Committee. I would like members to ensure that the works proposed do not go directly against our own conditions. I'm no expert in these matters, but in the report there seems to be an element of doubt as to whether the works proposed will cause damage to the trees in the RPA. At 7.11 in the report on page 28, the tree officer states that the works are of suitable design to reduce, I repeat, reduce the impact on the RPA of neighbouring trees. Is this an acknowledgement that it can't fully protect the protected trees, I ask? At 7.2, a further condition is proposed by the tree officer for better load-bearing properties. Once again, is this an acknowledgement or a suitable solution to the problem? At 7.13, it states, officers therefore conclude that the proposed works are acceptable and will maintain the health and amenity of the protected trees. All I ask is, can officers be 100% sure that the works will provide a surety in that? I'm not speaking here to stop progress, and I certainly don't wish to spoil the applicant's well-being, as I am a garden lover myself, but I am here to ensure the protection of the trees in the RPA. Thank you for listening. Obviously, I will leave this issue now with the Planning Committee to ask questions of the relevant officers to ensure the RPA is protected and continues to be protected in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Any members have any questions for Councillor Cooper? No. Thank you, Andrew. Right, the next speaker on this is Lucy Harris. Yeah, when you you press the button on the right-hand side, and then you've got 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
I was extremely surprised to see that the tree officer has no objections or arboreal cultural concerns. This application does not meet the most basic requirements to assess the impact of a development on the roots of the trees, therefore should be rejected. The tree officer and planners make reference to requirements to a small section of the British Standard BS 5837. However, I believe there is far more of this guidance that must be considered. In section 4.3, it advises that a soil assessment should be carried out during the impact assessment. This has not been done. In section 5.3.2 of the standard, it states that the cumulative effects of incursions into the RPA are damaging and should be avoided. Where there is evidence that a tree has been previously subjected to damage by construction activity, this should be taken into account when considering the acceptability of further activity in the RPA. In October 2022, Meadowview Homes breached the planning condition by operating an excavator within the RPA of the trees due to failing to erect the required protective fencing. Enforcement action was taken and David Cunningham was involved following this to determine remedial action involving aeration of the soil to try and counter any damage from soil compaction in the RPA. The impact of these issues has not been considered in regard to this application. Speaking of control measures to protect the RPA during construction works, Section 5 also states that plans should include the precise location of protective barriers to be erected to protect trees and their roots. This application includes both works in and around the RPA, yet there is not a single mention of these types of control measures. This committee required Meadowview Homes to implement a set of conditions to protect the RPA, including signage, barriers, excavation using hand tools only, which is also a requirement of British standard. Why does this application not include any of these requirements? Who decided that the trees no longer require this type of protection, and where is the evidence of that decision today? So the applicant may have used some methods that could be viewed as reducing the risk within the RPA, but where is the assessment of that in this application with these trees and with this site history? Why has a tree survey not been done? Why is the guidance not being followed? All questions I would be asking if I was sitting in your chairs this afternoon. So we expected to be told today that the changes are only minor, but potential harm to these trees is far from minor. These trees are over 20 metres tall. Several homes lie within metres of their base. My children play in and around these trees in our garden. The RPA protection is a preventive measure to stop damage from occurring to roots of trees to ensure long-term tree survival and stability. The British standard states any damage to roots will not show for several years, and it's clear that will be too late to do anything. Will the Council stand by a decision to approve this if injury or worse occurs in years to come? I've heard this committee be reminded on many occasions of the need to ensure there is enough evidence when making the decisions due to the risk of legal implications and compensation. Reading the British Standard, I've lost count of the number of times it states to avoid building within the RPA is the best way to protect the roots of the trees. Now, at risk of stating the obvious, it's that simple. Build outside the RPA.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Durham.
Questions partly to yourself, sort of to the officers as well. You listed a lot of questions as part of that. Officers, did you get note of those questions? Because when we come to the officers' questions, we'll be asking that, so I'm just hoping that you've got note of it. Just making sure.
That is my question.
Okay, thank you.
Did the officers manage to get note of those, and do you need any repeating from the objector to make sure we ask those questions properly?
Chair, if there are specific questions that members will be wanting to ask officers subsequently, I've only taken a general note that the speaker was asking us, do we have the evidence and assessment as to why the works that are proposed are now acceptable and won't impact on the long-term health and safety of the tree? That's what I've taken down.
And also why there wasn't the need to do the assessment if the assessment hasn't been done.
So what I'd seen as well is you were asking about the soil quality as well. Okay, so could we make sure we have a note of that, please? And was there any other questions that you had? 'Cause I lost. I'm afraid you were talking very fast. You had a lot of information. I lost track. So I'm terribly sorry.
To summarise, it's why then. We're very familiar, and anybody that's familiar with this case will be aware of the detailed tree assessments that have been done in the past. To us, this isn't any different, whether it's a development of a whole site or it's a development within a garden. When it comes to the trees, it doesn't make any difference. I think I've got it here. This is it doesn't like a tree survey to me that's been submitted from the tree officer. So why is the detailed tree survey nowhere does it say anywhere, even what species the tree are, what the measurements are.
Okay.
So why has that not been done?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just making sure we got those. Thank you.
Right, thank you. If you want to retake your seat. Right, the next speaker on this is David Harries, who's joining us by Teams, I believe.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, yep.
Good. Thank you for hosting
3
me
minutes when
remotely.
you're ready.
It's made my life a lot easier with being remote, and then work commitments, so thank you. Would you like me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, I'm a resident of Prospect House, which lies adjacent to the site of this application. We own the protected trees which lie along the boundary of the development site. Trees are a material consideration in planning matters and should be treated in line with the planning regulations. Building within the root protection area of trees in BS 5837 section 7.1 state the first principle: the trees are the priority and the RPA should be undisturbed. Considering this applicant isn't building a hospital, a school or critical infrastructure linked to government targets, but building for their own aesthetics, I am sure the RPA can be avoided. When the Planning Inspectorate upheld this committee's decision to reject a Wild Goose Homes application in June 2018, the main reason was the lack of assessment of the risk posed to the trees. These trees give great amenity value, biodiversity and natural habitat for wildlife. The Planning Inspectorate recognised this and upheld the rejection in order for an arboreal culture assessment to be carried out. This application involves building within the RPA, but can you see an arboreal culture assessment on the planning portal? In fact, can you see the names and types of trees affected stated anywhere in the information provided? No. The document titled RPA Impact Plan is a drawing with no impact assessment and has been drawn by the applicants themselves. The Council's requirements for tree assessments to be carried out in detail for any application which may present a risk is very clear. This has not been done. Historical assessments held by the Council or from previous applications are over 2 years old and state they are no longer valid. No tree assessments have taken place since the new houses were constructed. Why not? In the limited assessments relating to these trees that has been included, the Council's tree officer has stated in his report that the application covers less than 20% of the RPA. What he has failed to take into consideration is the fact that the RPA of the trees affected by this application fall under the land ownership of 5 landowners, with 91% of the RPA being out of the control of the applicant. Has it been assessed to see what has happened to the land outside of the control of this application? There's no evidence of this. If more than 20% of the RPA has already been covered by the Council's tree officer argument onto why it is fundamentally flawed and in breach of the British standard that he's quoted. Any comments made today relating to the land outside 7 Hornby Way
You
will be
have
based
30
on
seconds.
assumptions and have not been considered by this committee. It is clear there's been no adequate assessment of the trees and the roots in order to approve this application. So the application should be rejected under SDC2 in the local plan, the National Planning Policy Framework 193 and Section 197 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. All require that trees are not put at risk by development. If you do not assess the risk, how do you know if the trees will be harmed? The simplest way to protect the trees is not to build in the RPA.
Are you summing up? Because you've had your 3 minutes now, please.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That was my sum. The reason to reject was the summing up.
Right, we have oh, sorry, have any members got questions? No, thank you. Right, the next speaker on this application is Stephen Pearson Ward, a supporter of the application. You have 3 minutes when you're ready, Stephen. You press the right-hand button. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Pearson Ward. I'm a neighbour living directly opposite the property, where I've got full view of the proposal. I don't feel it'll be detrimental to the area in any way. In fact, it could be beneficial. I'm in support with 3 things in mind: environment, biodiversity and well-being. Firstly, the environment. It would benefit from growing something for yourself. It's more sustainable. In fact, the Council's own environment report mentions that any contribution in growing your own things helps. no matter how small or how few. Secondly, growing your own plants and flowers will attract insects and birds, again only beneficial to protecting all sorts of species and promoting biodiversity. I know they already have a resident in their back box, and as you know, that's a protected mammal. Thirdly, what can be better for any of us than personal well-being? Spending time in your own outdoor space, a place to grow things, relax from all the stresses that life brings to us every day. To achieve these three things, we obviously need storage, something to grow items in, and a place to relax. Other properties in the area have these things. In fact, I've got a shed in my back garden, which I'm sure most of you have. I didn't have to go to planning to ask for it, so I can't understand why these people do. I understand that there's some concern about the adjoining trees, but surely this can't really be an issue, as I know down the road on the council allotments, there are potting sheds, etc., built right underneath the trees. The trees are thriving. Furthermore, it appears, and we've now heard, the tree officer is satisfied with the scheme. This proposal encompasses all the three things that I've mentioned: the environment, biodiversity and well-being. Things we all care about, we all enjoy and we all take for granted. So why would it be fair to deny the applicant the same? I don't
30
think
seconds.
I do, and would ask committee to approve the application. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Members have any questions? No, thank you. If you'd like to retake your seat. Next. We have one more speaker on this application, which is Samuel Thompson, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Ward. It's on. When the red light's on you, it's on. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members, and thank you for taking the time to consider our application today. I would like to start by highlighting the case officer's recommendation for approval, and most importantly, the support from the local authority tree officer. I understand the primary concern raised by the councillor who called this application to committee today is the encroachment of our landscaping scheme into the root protection area of the trees, to the rear of our property. I want to assure the committee that we are fully aware of our responsibilities regarding these trees. Whilst only one of the trees to the rear of our property is protected by a tree preservation order, we have carefully designed the scheme to be in compliance with British Standards 5837, the British standards for the construction root protection areas. This acknowledges that construction can take place in up to 20% of a root protection area without significant impact. Our landscaping scheme covers only 2.5% of the agreed root protection area and physically interacts with less than 1%. The construction methods we proposed are widely recognised and used up and down the country on a daily basis for the construction of works within root protection areas. These techniques are clearly detailed in our submitted plans and have been accepted by the tree officer. Whilst we've taken great care to protect the trees, it's important to emphasise the primary purpose for this proposal is to create a more enjoyable and biodiverse environment in our garden. From a young age, I've been growing vegetables with my parents, and this is something I hope to continue in our first home together. Encouraging homegrown produce not only reduces food miles, but also supports local biodiversity. At its core, this is a landscaping proposal, not a major development. We have followed all the necessary planning policies to ensure that the trees are protected. Our scheme has received the approval of both the planning officer and the tree officer, and we've welcomed their recommendations in making adjustments to the scheme where necessary to further safeguard the trees. I would like to highlight the modest scale of this proposal. Many of the features we're requesting, such as a greenhouse, patio, and planting beds, are common elements in many residential gardens. This is not an application for a garage, an outbuilding with deep foundations, or any form of major construction. Our aim is simply to enhance our outdoor space whilst ensuring the trees remain protected. Given the support of both the planning officer and the tree officers, we respectfully ask the committee to approve this application in line with officers' recommendations. Thank you very much for your time.
Do members have any questions? Councillor Durham?
Thank you, Chair. Hello there, I'm Councillor Durrant. Nice to meet you. Just yourself and Mr Pearson Ward both referred to growing and improving biodiversity. I know this is not subject to the application, but I'd just like to understand a little bit more of how you're considering that. You're saying you want to grow, the applicant's wanting to grow things. What kind of things have you been considering of that? Has that been considered, or is that just something part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of the scheme, so the applicant is my partner, sorry, so I live with them. The whole idea of the scheme is to sort of promote a better garden space for us to be able to enjoy. I mean, I've already started planting the seeds. They're upstairs growing on a windowsill, loads of vegetables ready for a harvest in the summer, hopefully. And, you know, the idea is kind of to go for a bit of a cottagey garden vibe, so try and encourage bees, wildlife to enter the property. As the objector pointed out, there's loads of wildlife in the area. The aim is to try and get that into the garden a bit more. Yeah, it's simply, at its simplest form, it's a landscaping scheme. We'd like somewhere to be able to grow. You know, the great thing about the trees is they do bring sort of, sorry, we love the trees, but one of the things about them is they bring shade. So we've included a greenhouse within the proposal to try and give us a better chance at growing things to be more sustainable. Yeah, it's been located. I know it's been located to try and be in the best position for the sun, essentially, through, you know, living in the property for a while and observing how things work in the garden. We've done our best to mitigate anything.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for that. And just, this is just your standard greenhouse sitting on. It's not being
Yeah,
driven in.
it's sat on a ring of sleepers that, you know, we might scrape the top layer of turf off to be able to seat them properly in the ground. But you know, this application is a landscaping scheme. We're not digging big foundations. It's not like we're putting a garage or a house in the back garden on top of these root protection areas. We're putting a greenhouse there. That's it. It's a greenhouse in its simplest form.
A very small house.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think any members have got any more questions. If you'd like to retake your seat.
Thank you.
Right, members, now time to put questions to officers. Anybody got any questions for officers? Councillor Durham.
Could we address some of the questions that the objector Lucy Harries has raised? So the soil information and the character that we discussed while the objector was there, if that's possible.
If it's okay with yourself and the chair, I'd like to defer to the tree officer for this one because he's got the necessary expertise to answer the question. Fantastic, thank you.
Good afternoon, Committee. Yes, so the requirements in the British Standard, they're basically, it takes a form of guidance and recommendations. So there's quite a large list of things which are to be included or recommended to be included. That'll include full assessments of the soil quality, structure, chemical composition, topographical surveys and things like that, and input from different specialists, which in my interpretation may be necessary when you're dealing with something proportionate to that requirement. And the information that I would generally look for, I would balance myself as whether or not it's sufficient for me to make a recommendation. Yeah. So with regards to this site, there were numerous surveys, tree surveys undertaken a couple of years ago, which resulted in me having to go to the site to work out which information was relevant to the previous application. And that also included me measuring every feature of every tree and looking at each tree in detail with other officers. So, and that might be a couple of years ago, I think. So to some extent, I'm very familiar with these trees when ordinarily when I'd be looking for information to be provided, I might not necessarily know those trees, but these ones I do know. And also there was the contravention or breach of the protective barrier, which resulted in heavy plant tracking across the RPAs during the initial development. So I went to see the trees again, and it was me who recommended the soil amelioration measures, and it was me who supervised those works. So I'm quite familiar with what's happened to these trees and what condition they're in. So with regards to the application, I wasn't entirely sure what the additional detail, what that would bring to my recommendation, insofar as I pretty much knew all the details anyway, and it seemed disproportionate to ask an applicant to go and pay for a tree survey again when I effectively knew all that information. So that's, I think, with regards to the detailed information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to summarise that so I understand it correctly, just to say it back to you, effectively, these weren't demanded to be done again because in the last 2 years or so, these have already been done, and so you already had that information, so you could make that judgment call based upon the existing things from previous data. Is that have I got that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. And in addition, it was me who did it.
Yeah, so you had personal knowledge of having been to the site there. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Dunn, I can give some detail on that. David Cunningham attended site in November 22, over 2 years ago.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. For either of you who would answer this, we've heard from Lucy Harris. She mentioned that we might not be following, or she said we're not following British standards. I've read what's in the report, and that says that you can build on up to 20% of an RPA. Is that correct, yeah? And then we've heard from a supporter or agent saying that it's actually, they're only building on 2.5%. That was one of the figures. There was another figure given, but it was 2.5% was one of the figures. Can you confirm that that's all accurate? Because it looks like it, to me, it pretty much hinges around that. When we look at the policy, we should be looking at SDC 2, and in there it says in SDC 2 we've got to avoid damage. I think it's SDC 2. So the second point, the second paragraph. So it's about avoiding damage and not building, or building only to a certain percentage on the RPA. So there's the 20%, which is the British standards, and there's the 2.5%. So is that what I'm looking at as a member? Is that what I should be considering? And are those figures accurate?
Hello, yeah. So it's like I was saying, the British Standard does give guidance and recommendations, and it does advise that hard standing, the threshold limitation would be 20% of the RPA of previously untouched ground. So yes, you know, if you're looking at covering 1% with porous gravel, that's different and less impactful, in my opinion, than a sealed asphalt or sealed macadam finish. So yes, you're looking at the right figures.
And those figures are accurate. Yeah, that 2.5% is accurate from the agent.
I have nothing to think otherwise. I've not been out and measured those details, but looking at it and looking at the 450 square metre RPA of that tree, that the footprint of the greenhouse is not going to be, 80 square metres or whatever 20% is. It's just it's well below the threshold recommendation. But whoever provided the scale drawings made those calculations. That wasn't me. Somebody calculated that because they're scale drawings.
If I can come back on that again, Chair, because for me it looks like it hinges on this. Yeah. So that 2.5%, which is being quoted, is obviously below the 20%. Is it the actual construction of the building that's going there? Is that the 2.5% or that I'm looking at, or is it the actual what it's standing on? So what is that 2.5%? What does it relate to?
With regards to this design, I think the 2.5%, my understanding is that if you were to add those figures up, it's less than 1% of the impact. I think the 2% is probably in the region of like where the garden area is, or something like that. It's so below, in my opinion, it doesn't really require that much thought. It's well below.
At the risk of getting kicked out, what about the rest of the RPA? Such a small proportion lies in the
Thank you. It's, we're listening to the officers at the moment. It's the time to speak to officers. So if you could please not interrupt, thank you. Councillor Liggett, next we got.
I think most of my questions have been answered actually, but I was just a little bit concerned about this, the conditions, number three, prior to commencement, etc. The specification for the foundation of the greenhouse shall be submitted to and approved in writing. Surely that should be with us today, rather than afterwards, because that's obviously very important in this one.
Chair, just a couple of points, if I may. First of all, hopefully just had a brief chat with David about the point that Councillor Foster made, bearing in mind that we have calculated the RPA, the entire RPA, at about 450 square metres. I think that's right, David. The ground floor area of the greenhouse is roughly 2 by 2.5, which is 5 square metres, which is that figure of 2.5% isn't out of the way, bearing in mind what David said about the wider 20%. I can't talk about the rest of the RPA as has been mentioned, but in terms of this application, those figures sound about right to me. And just in respect of the issue that Councillor Liggett's mentioned, I'll be corrected if this is incorrect, but the revised condition that's set out in the late reps seeks to avoid the need to follow up with another discharge of condition application by setting out that the ground floor of the works, that the ground coverage of the works will be a specific material that we are of the opinion will not have an adverse impact on the root system of the tree. And that's why we've phrased it in that way, and that was a discussion between myself and colleagues and the applicant prior to committee, which is why we put it in the late reps. I think that answers the question, hopefully.
Thank you, members. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Just on behalf of Councillor Cooper, who's not here, I'll ask the same question that you wanted answering. And he asked, are you 100% sure that this, if it is built, will it protect the RPA? I think that was his question. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, basically, it's well within anything that would be considered acceptable activity within the RPA. And in my opinion, it's well designed, actually. Will it cause damage? It will cause damage. That is to be understood. But these are physiological, these are organisms in which, in which they recover. So they are resilient. So the simple act of walking across an RPA causes damage. It's whether or not it's acceptable and whether or not it can recover reasonably quickly. And these, the impact is minimal. Yeah. Hopefully that answers it.
If I just add to that, Chair, if I may, Councillor Foster's mentioned policy SDC2 today, and the point that David's made is that the policy requires that the protected tree in the long term continues to be protected, and that is the calculation that we've taken as officers, bearing in mind the specialist advice that we have and that David's given us.
Any further questions, members? Right, I will open the floor for debate. Councillor Durham.
Yeah, so I'm just going to summarise my notes of what I've got here. So first of all, the concerns about the, what had not been done, I think is, from my opinion, been addressed, because these assessments have been done recently, and we should trust the expertise of our officers who go out. Secondly, looking at policy SDC2, on point 2, this would not result in any unacceptable loss, damage or threaten the continued well-being of protected trees, because it is ultimately something that's not going into the ground. It's not asphalt. It's not anything that's going to be driving foundations in. There's nothing there. I do accept the point that it'll cause damage, but I think that's a very good point to raise, that the act of walking in the RPA causes it damage, but nothing that can't be recoverable. And I think we're talking about minuscule margins where we're saying the level of damage, if I've got that correct. And so I don't feel there is any reason to reject this. Less than 1%, I think it's 0.9% this is the greenhouse is going to be covering, if I've got my maths right. So I don't see any reason why we should reject this, so I'll be supporting it, and if no one else will put it forward, I'll put forward a motion to accept the officer's recommendations and grant.
Do any members want to contribute to the board's debate before we... Right, have we got a seconder for Councillor Durrant's motion?
I'll second it.
Right, thank you, Councillor Lacey. So if we can put that to the vote, please.
That's it.
Right. Thank you, members. That's unanimous. The application has been approved. We're just waiting on Councillor Cooper to return to the meeting. Right then, members, we'll move on to item 8, planning and appeals. I'll now ask the officer to run through the report. Item 8, appeals lodged and determined. And that's over to you, Mr. Kirkham.
I've little to add to the report in this instance, Chair. There's been a couple of appeals lodged that relate to the single property, and then there's an enforcement appeal there that's been lodged as well. And 2 appeals that have been allowed, which members I'm sure will be interested in reading, and then one that's been dismissed. As dismissal is another Greenbelt one, which is quite unusual in terms of Greenbelt policy. It was dismissed in terms of the development's impact on the character of the area, so it does make an interesting reading. So again, Chair, I'd encourage all members to read all the decisions that we send through to you. They should be hopefully reflective of good decision making by ourselves, but also can often give good pointers of how policies are being interpreted at a national level. So other than that, Chair, happy to take any questions, but no further comments this time round.
Thank you, Adrian. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. That one that's been dismissed, that's the Ridgeway one, yeah? Yeah, the Ridgeway one. When that was looked at by the inspector, did they use, I'm guessing they did, the new MPPF?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question. But if it was determined post-Christmas, which it would have been, I'm pretty sure, then it would have looked at the new MPPF. All these coming through now should be new MPPF compliant. I just don't know exactly when that one was, but I'm presuming so.
Chair, I asked that because when you look at the appeals that are allowed, some of them may well have been turned down by officers on the old MPPF, and now they're being looked at under the new MPPF. So there'll be a period of time, I'm guessing, where 1, 2, 3 months.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Longer, yeah? Is that right?
You're absolutely right. We're being asked for appeals that are currently in the system for comment on the new MPPF and how they may or may not impact on the appeal. So you're right. We may well have been refusing these applications on previous MPPF policies. They're now being determined on the back of new MPPF policies. So there is that transition going on.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Do we all agree to note the report?
Yep.
Right, I have no urgent business. I declare the meeting closed. And thank you everyone for your attendance.